To bake light maps in Blender, we first need to make sure that the scene or objects are set up with respect to the lighting that's going to be captured. So that means placing light objects or light emitting materials or surfaces, as well as checking the background color with respect to the pseudo ambient lighting that is going to be captured or not, depending on the scene. So once we've got that, switch to shading workspace. We need to modify the materials. So for each material that's assigned to an object that's going to be baked, we need to make some modifications. Let's just switch into full screen, Control Spacebar. We need to add an additional image texture. So add image texture, and we need to add 2 UVMap nodes. So add input UVMap. We need 2 of these, one for the light map and one for the main material. So for the one for the main material, that's going to use the default UVMap. So we can select that from the UVMap selection list, and then we can connect that UV output to vector input. This tells the main material to use this UV map for our material. This will come in handy later on. Then for the light map, same again, UV to vector. We haven't yet generated the Lightmap UVs, so there's nothing here to set. What we can also do at this point is create a new image. This will be our Lightmap image. Set its size, 2048. And then either a color or using a generated grid image. Either or can be used. So click OK, and that creates our Lightmap substrate. We need to duplicate this now for all the materials that are assigned to the objects that are going to be baked. So trim, same again, add texture, image texture, add input UVMap. Select the UV and then connect nodes. With these additional image textures, we just set Lightmap. So we can copy this, select, shift click, node, copy, select our other material, node, paste. This is already connected. This one we just need to connect that up. And that's our basic material setup for the moment. So back to the main screen. So once we've got that set up, next in Object Data Properties, we want UV maps. Select, highlight, and access the aperture. What we're going to do is add an additional UVMap channel or layer to each of the objects. So if we do this now, it helps later on when we're unwrapping the UVs for the light map. So for that, all we need to do is select our object, and then in UV Maps, click on the plus button to add a new channel, and then we can double click and just rename this light map. Set that as the active UV, so click the camera icon, make sure the entry is highlighted, and that switches the focus to this light map. This is what the bake tool will bake to or bake using. So as we've got that now set, we can now set that as the UV map that the light map's image texture node is going to use. So click on the list and we should have light map available for selection. So set, and again repeat this for all the objects and all the materials that are assigned to each object. Light map, select the image texture node, make sure that's highlighted. Need to repeat this for each object. Use the same UVMap name. Again, activate, select. Lightmap. Lightmap. And we can see as we do this, initially the material that's assigned to our object can't reference Lightmap, so it's showing or highlighting red to indicate there's an error. But as we add the actual Lightmap reference or data block, that changes and it then references the correct Lightmap. So these are new. So click the list, Lightmap. Same again, highlights that there's no UV map on this particular object. So we add it. And again, select the image texture node. Make sure that's the active object. And double check our material assignments. We also need to make sure that we remove any dead or unused material references. So material properties, and just remove. So just to summarize, make sure that the materials, each material that's assigned to the object that's going to be baked, it has an extra image texture, and to that an image is assigned, and linked to that is our UV map that instructs Blender to use the Lightmap that we've just created, and that's linked through to the Lightmap image. Similarly, another UV node is linked to the texture nodes of the main material. So let's just take a quick look at the full material. So Control Spacebar, and this is what we've got. So we've got our main material and then the Lightmap section. So before we bake, make sure the Lightmap image node is selected for each of the materials. being careful not to misassign our materials. Then we can switch to UV editing and unwrap the light map itself. So select the image, browse to, there's the light map. So we need to select all the objects that are going to be baked. So object mode, shift click to select them all. If there are other objects in the scene that shouldn't be selected. Otherwise, just press the A key to select all. Toggle back into edit mode. Select all. Make sure any pinned UVs are unpinned. Again, make sure we've got all the objects selected and that we've then selected all the objects UVs that are going to be baked. Double check object data properties, UV maps. So double check the light map is selected. Then from the UV menu, select Lightmap Pack. So UV menu, Lightmap Pack in the 3D view, or UV Unwrap Lightmap Pack using the UV editor. Both menus access the same options. So Unwrap, Lightmap Pack. Here we basically just want to set the image size, and this should match the image that we created previously, 2048. Everything else can be left on the defaults, and then just click OK. And if we've done this correctly, the UV maps for the objects should remain intact. So we shouldn't see any change or modification to the appearance of the objects based on what we're looking at in the 3D view when we're in preview mode. So we can check the mesh just to make sure. And then we're ready to bake. So this is our Lightmap UV map. And essentially it's broken each of the meshes down into their constituent parts, their faces, individual faces. So once we've got that, render properties, and then we want to switch the render engine from Eevee to cycles. So click on the list, select cycles. This will give us access to bake properties down at the bottom. Expand. And for a light map that includes color, the colored influence of the lighting on the scene, we want to change the bake type to diffuse, and then disable color input or color contributions. All we need is indirect and direct lighting, so that's the influence of the light on the scene itself. Disabling color disables the images that are applied to the objects themselves influencing the bake. So we just want direct and indirect lighting. And all we need to do is click on the bake button. And this may take some time depending on the complexity of the objects and the number of them, how many there are. So click bake and Blender will start baking the map. And that is our light map. So if we've done this correctly, if we set all the objects up and the scene up correctly, the baked light map won't influence any of the other objects that are in the scene. So that's the way to check that the objects are set up correctly for light mapping. But once we've got this, once we've got our light map, we can then save the image. So image, save, save as, or save a copy, depending on preferences. So save as, this will give us the file pop-up. Light map, objects, select the format or set the format, so file format, lossless, BMP, Tiger Raw or TIFF, and then save as image. So now this has been saved, it will override the generated image that we created earlier. So although we now have a light map, we want to test this now to make sure that the settings that we used produced a good quality light map. So for that, we need to just quickly go back into Shading Workspace. There are our objects, and as a quick test, all we need to do is connect color output to base color input of Principled BSDF, and we can see already that there are some inaccuracies with our light map. So to correct for those, what we can do is decouple, recouple, decouple, recouple, and we do this because if we rebake this texture map, it'll give us a circular reference error message. So make sure that our image texture, the light map image texture, is selected or highlighted. Back into UV editing, and here we can do two things, or one of two things, depending on the inaccuracies that we saw within the light map. So the first one is to set the margin, to decrease that, so we're using less space, so let's say 8 pixels, and or we need to remap the UVs, unwrap Lightmap pack, so UV unwrap Lightmap pack, and we need to increase the margin in Lightmap pack. So if we increase this slightly, that increases the space that's between each of the UV islands, the individual faces, as well as, or in combination with, the margin size, which should compensate for the bleed. So that what we were looking at, the error, was texture bleed. So the texture, the light map colors have spilled over into different areas. That's what causes that artifacting. So if we OK that, it'll redistribute the UVs or rebuild the UV map, and then we can rebake. So just click the bake button again. So once that is done, we can resave the image. So image, just save over the top of the one that we created previously. And again, Shading Workspace, and just temporarily couple color to base color, and we'll be able to see a preview of the corrections. And that looks like it's worked to a degree. So essentially what we have to do is just keep doing that, making corrections to the settings until we get rid of or remove any artifacts. but that is baking a light map in Blender.